You're watching Voiceover, How Did You Do It? At voiceoverpodcast.com, where we talk to seasoned, successful voice actors to find out how they did it. I'm your host, Ian Kleinfeld, and you can find me at voicebyian.com. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at voicebyian. So welcome, Rolf. Thank you for coming to the podcast. Appreciate it. Let's just dig in. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your history with voiceover and how you got into Voice123 and anything else that might be of interest.
Happy to be here. I'm like we just mentioned, I'm calling from the other side of the ocean. I'm currently living in the Netherlands, where I am from. I'm trying to hide the S, but it's hard to hide it. There are many words that have the S, so everybody immediately notices that I am from the Netherlands. I've actually been living here for the last 6 months because the 5 years before I have lived in Colombia and moved between Colombia and the Netherlands and the US. And that connects to Voice123 because in those 5 years, I got to know Alexander and Tanya, who are the founders of Voice123. And I got introduced to them in 2015, 2016. And I've worked with them on several projects, and they basically trained me, introduced me to the voiceover industry, trained me in tech. And then by 2018, they asked me to take over at the helm of Voice123. So I have not so much experience, but it was a great opportunity for me, and I've enjoyed it a lot. Yeah.
Have you been the CEO of other companies?
I have not. No, this is my first CEO position.
Oh, congratulations.
I've mostly had advisor roles where I advised the CEO. And then I realized, well, maybe I should get my feet wet, so to speak, and actually do the work myself instead of just advising from a distance. So, but it's been great. Actually, the first year, I received a lot of training on the job from Alex and Tanya directly. So they basically mentored me, for I think in a period of 2.5 years to get me to this position, and then they felt comfortable stepping further away from Voice123, which they've done in the last couple of years. So they've been involved for the first 15 years, and then they wanted to focus on other opportunities. And that's how in 2018 we got to where I am now. Yeah.
Great. And so I guess you were advisor, so your background is in business?
I'm an historian. I'm an historian by trade. So I still remember my dad saying, "Why don't you choose studies where you actually can get a job in?" But I studied history. Actually, American history is where I focused on, and on media studies. So I was writing essays about the influence of Fox News on political and social discourse.
So I've always been essays on that when I studied political history, too, political science. Yeah.
And I think right now there's a lot of essays on that topic specifically. So it's kind of an interesting one. But so my background is not at all in business. So I had to really go through consistent training. Basically, what you learn in history, in my case, is thinking in big visions and in long-term narratives and long-term stories. And I think I realized in the last couple of years that's come in handy when in a CEO position. I have to consume a lot of information, reports, data, talking to people, and then turn it into a coherent story all the time. So on one level, being a CEO is just a different version of being a storyteller, but then in the ecosystem of a company. And then business acumen, you kind of have to learn you have to learn the language, learn the strategy, but I feel that's all learnable. So yeah, I had to learn all of that.
So at what point did you shift from historian to business?
Well, I graduated in 2011, and there was not a single opening that required a person who studied history, because that's at the time the economic crisis hit Europe. So there weren't any jobs. So I worked in call centers, I worked in bars, I basically did any type of job. Then worked in the government for a long time as like a consultant to help them get more digital. And I then joined what was then Torre, which was basically the owner company of Voice123. And I joined there as an advisor on management consulting and how to set up systems to work remotely. So the Voice123 has been working remote pre-pandemic. So we've already done that for the last 5 to 10 years. And I was helping the company set up, how do you organize? How do you hire people from different companies? How do you communicate with each other? and then how do you build performance systems. So all of that I did before I joined as the CEO.
Oh, very good. Those are
So
good things.
I'm not an expert in anything. I just
Hmm.
know a little bit of enough for me to then be in this role.
Great. Okay. That makes sense. Because as a CEO, you do everything.
I think so. In the end, you have to talk to a lot of people. I realized.
Hmm.
I actually on my first day on the job, I googled what does a CEO do,
Uh-huh.
and I just did that,
Uh-huh.
and that's how I start. I think that's how most people start. They just start their job hoping for the best if they have
Uh-huh.
no experience in it. So I
Uh-huh.
googled my way through it and then learned on the job. And
Uh-huh.
I tried to always be very open in what I don't know, and that's helped me in the last couple of years a lot. So sort of just have to get on with it and make sure that the people in the company, because Voice123 is a company of like 25 to 30 people, all of them are experts.
Hmm.
So my role is to not be in the way, make sure they have resources and they're motivated and they're working towards a common goal. That I perceive that to be my goal, and so far I'm enjoying that a lot.
Great. That's good. That's a great story. I mean, because most people will go to business school and
Yeah,
whatever. So it's really nice to hear someone not doing the traditional route and winding up
like
as
that.
a effective CEO as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So far so good. They
excellent.
did. Yeah, so far they don't know. So I'm still here
Okay. And so you said you've been here at Voice123 for how long again?
as a CEO 2018,
2018.
and working with Voice123 since 2016.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
So let me ask some other questions here.
Yeah.
Thank you for that intro. That was great. Um, so I'm just going to dig right into the AI thing to start.
All right.
And so, why should I and others, as a voice actor, embrace AI and text to speech? Many voice actors see this as just another way to kind of race to the bottom in terms of compensation, quality, and respect for the craft. How will
Yeah.
this benefit us, and why should we be on board?
So I think that's a big question. That's
Yeah.
gonna take take the next 20 minutes for us to debate. Love to hear your insights on this as well. But my vision of this is about 4 or 5 years ago, I was very afraid of what AI was going to do to
Hmm.
our industry, right? So I joined Voice123. I asked them, what is the biggest threat? One of the biggest threat they said was, well, there's AI voices coming that might disrupt the industry. And if that takes away jobs from voice actors, then Voice123 is at risk. So
Hmm.
uh, I was set up from the get-go to research, to be involved, to make sure that I know a lot about it. We even try to develop part of the technology to see how difficult it is. Turned out it's very difficult. Uh, and then at first I was scared, and then I realized, okay, this is not necessarily gonna fundamentally disrupt every part of VO. It's gonna change a part of what VO is now, net, just in the same way that things in the past have changed VO, like the ability for more people to connect via platforms like Voice123. Hardware is cheaper. Those are all impactful things that have changed the
Hmm.
VO industry, and I think AI is just another one that's going to do that.
Hmm.
But it's not going to replace humans. It's just going to be a tool that, as a VO, you're going to have to want to master. So you
Hmm.
want to be able to work with not just your own voice, but in sometimes when there's a super fast turnaround and you need maybe partly super acting type work and maybe a part is just filler, then AI can help you with those kind of projects.
Uh,
Considering it's going to be a hype for the next couple of years,
hmm.
because the word AI makes it sound very impressive. In
Hmm.
the end, it's not that smart of a technology,
Right.
but it's hypey right now, so everybody wants to use it. So your ability to offer it as a VA is going to be it's going to be useful because it allows you to book the kind of jobs that are coming to that to the whole new industry. And then one of the fastest growing projects that are being posted on Voice123 is versions of text to speech,
Hmm.
and they pay well. So I would, if I was a voice actor, I would be part of those projects, protect myself uh, contracting wise. And I think that's where companies like Voice123 should play a role to set out templates on how do you license your voice if you're going to
Hmm.
license it, and make sure that you don't do anything in perpetuity, to make sure that the voice is not getting reused. So I feel that's where the role of Voice123 is.
Yeah, talk a little bit
But
more about that. Like, what protections does Voice123 have or plan against the misuse of AI voices? Are you going to do anything specific to prevent the unauthorized uses of our voice for AI TTS? For example, say a client takes an AI voice and then makes a profile with a collection of AI voices. Is there any way to get your AI voice off the site or from that client? Or say you do a project that is not AI and the client then makes an AI voice with your work in spite of a contract that explicitly states that no AI projects may be created with your work. What will Voice123 do to prevent that and to support voice actors who have had this happen on a contract with Voice123 clients?
Again, there's like many use cases there. Like
Yeah.
I think the one that we're almost afraid of that I don't think is that likely is where, let's say they misuse the audio that's on my website to then
Mm-hmm.
train a model and use that voice. Like
Mm-hmm.
the companies are not that sophisticated, technology is not that sophisticated, and that's not how TTS modeling works. So I don't
Okay.
think we have to be afraid of that in the first place.
At least
The
for now.
at least for now, but even then, the recording TTS is super hard. Right?
Okay.
Recording, whoever has done the recording, it's a lot of, let's say it's 5,000 to 8,000 words. It's very
Mm-hmm.
consistent work. You have to technically not act, so you have to be consistent over 8,000 words in the exact same style for a
Mm-hmm.
long time. So it's super hard work in the first place. So a random collection of audio from your voice is not going to generate any good AI. So what AI is going to do, it's going to mirror, I think, how the industry works right now. You have a lot of good voice actors, you have a lot of super good voice actors, and you have a lot of maybe not so good voice actors. And
Mm-hmm.
AI is basically mirroring that, because what AI is a lot of data to generate a voice.
Mm-hmm.
So not so good voice actors are gonna not create not so good AI. Medium are gonna create medium AI, and super good are gonna create good AI.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's gonna mirror that a bit. But I'm deviating from the question about protection.
No,
So
that's
what I,
okay. We'll get back to it. This is all interesting, and this is all important information for us to know.
what I think a company like Voice123 should do, ideally, we sit with the unions to hammer out sort of like an industry standard, because it's uncharted territory right now,
Right.
right? We don't know what the rules are. A standard breach of contract is still a breach of contract.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you do that in AI, in a commercial, or in a game voice, breach of contract is a breach of contract.
Mm-hmm.
And we always try to mediate in those items when they happen on Voice123, regardless whether they are text to speech, AI, or something else.
Okay.
Now, the question is more about, okay, what happens if I record a text-to-speech or an AI voice, and the client uses that in the example you gave to then offer their own services,
Mm-hmm.
or to keep training the model and then turning it into something else?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no fixed legislation on what happens in that case.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have a template as of now. That's one of the things that we want to work with, for example, the unions and with other companies, that we create a standard
Mm-hmm.
on that specific use case. Thankfully, it's not really happening that much, or not at all, at least on our platform.
Okay.
Um, and it comes mostly from these edge case fears that we might have. There's always going to be a company that's trying to find a shortcut to train their AI by trying to steal voices.
Right.
It's unlikely that's going to work, because it's such a difficult thing to do, and the human part of it is so essential that at best they're going to create shitty AI.
Mm-hmm.
So for a good AI to develop, it's going to be you working with a client to generate an AI version of your voice, and
Mm-hmm.
that needs almost like a live direction setting.
Mm-hmm.
And only at that moment, we're going to generate a good AI voice, and then it depends on the contract that you have with that person. But you're always in the know there. You're present there. It's not
Mm-hmm.
going to happen without you being present, or in spite of knowing you. And then the last part of this is that as AI gets better, the ability to trace and track files on the internet is also getting better and better.
Ah, right. Okay.
We're
Uh-huh.
we're trying to develop. We in 2019 we went live with a new platform,
Mm-hmm.
which was quite an interesting moment in our history. We had to do it. Let's not go too deep into that. But one of the things that we added to our platform was a watermark,
Mm-hmm.
consistent watermark for every file. It was a beep, which was so annoying that we turned it off straight away. But we've been since then working on a thing that is called a silent watermark.
Uh-huh.
So it's a way to identify the file itself, uh, and then how it's being used afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So there's ways to trace the kind of files that are being created and the audio that's being created, similar to how AI is developing. These kind of protective tools are also developing. So while I'm not going to say it will never happen, there will be use cases, but in the majority, it will be something that's going to get built with voice actors, not without them.
Excellent. So you've then, I guess, looked for a lot of input from voice actors and unions at this point so far while you're developing the AI.
So yeah, because we're not developing the AI, what I get in my
Okay.
ultimate scenario, Voice123, it does what it has always done. It's a place where people meet each other and they match up. Like we don't want to do the transaction. We want to make sure that you book the client and you keep the client for the rest of your life. So let's say you book a job on Voice123, it's your goal not to just complete that job, but make sure that you keep the client for the rest of your life. And we only see that first moment. And we want to do something similar for what is basically a new category of voiceover, which is AI voice. So that means for voice actors, the ability to offer an AI profile of themselves. So imagine there's Ian, and then there's also a playlist with Ian's abilities as an AI voice. That's either a way to get booked as an AI or as the real person, and then you have to have a licensing underneath that. Goes a bit too deep, but what I'm trying to say is that it's an ability for you to offer it. So we're facilitators of that. And the other part would be that ideally we try to round up as many what we consider ethical AI companies, and also make sure that they're visible on Voice123 and we show what they're doing and who they are. So there's a better sense of what kind of companies they are and how to work with them and what the prices are and how they utilize those voices. So we're trying to basically bring it more into one place instead of it being all scattered everywhere.
Okay. So then let's say I'm a voice actor.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try this AI thing, right?
Yeah.
How would I go about adding that to my profile? Like, do I have to contract with one of these companies to do like an AI demo, basically?
Right now, yes.
Okay.
Right now, actually, you as a voice actor most likely get paid to train their models, but I'm already predicting that within the next 18 months, it's going to be the other way around. That within 18, like let's say within 2 years, whenever you want to have an AI voice, you're going to have to pay a company to generate an AI voice for you. But right now, it's the other way around. Companies pay you because they also need the input to train their models and see how good it is. And then on Voice123, we have the concept of playlists. So let's say there's all these different samples of what you can do, and there's a playlist full of samples of your AI voice. And then as the system works right now, clients can book you directly via the AI or via what you normally do, but you're still in charge. All we do is we add the functionality. We're not in the middle there. It's the agreement that you have with the company. And for us, what we need to do is we need to vet the companies that are able to offer that AI.
So I would record with a company some AI. They would give me samples that I can put up, and then if a client wanted to hire me as a AI voice, how would that work? They would hire me and then talk to the company that recorded my voice, or?
Ideally, you would have most of these companies already have the tools themselves. You would log in to one of in this case, you, Ian, would log in into one of the companies and generate the AI voice yourself directly. But even better, it would be nice if we have a text box on on your profile, where let's say I paste the script as the person wanting to buy the AI voice.
Right.
And I download it after you give permission for me to download it.
Right.
And after it's being quoted, and that's the transaction.
So is that technology in place where people can just input a
No,
script? Okay.
not yet. No,
So
but we're
will
thinking
be.
about, we're
Okay.
thinking about building it. Or another version might be that you have a series of characters available on Voice123, and let's say I'm building a game and I need a placeholder for a wizard. Then for a set amount of dollars, I'm gonna ask you, can I use this character of yours for this game for this time? And then you give access to that AI voice to that person.
Okay. So then right now we can't have clients input a script. Maybe I'm just a little confused. What would the process be if a client wants to use my AI voice?
They will contact you directly. Can I use your AI voice? And then depending on the company you work with, you would have to generate it together.
Okay, so
Like
I would
Voice123 will
record
never get into the business of creating their own AI.
Okay, so I would then work with them to do a AI voice profile, and then they would use it.
Yeah, but you can host that. You can host the output of those profile on Voice123. But
Sorry, I
most of
don't
these
mean.
companies,
Yeah.
let's say you generate an AI voice with company X, at that moment, they would give you the login details of the tool, and you can
Okay.
generate instantly the voice yourself. So
I see.
it would be like an editing tool almost. So you can do the full deliverable by putting in the script, maybe listening to it once, and then send it back. I mean, you could also just record if you prefer that.
Okay, so let me see if I have this straight. So I would then work with a company to have an AI voice, and someone would hire me based on my AI voice profile. At that point, one of two things would happen. Either I would log into the company where I have an AI voice generated and use that script to generate that AI output and then send that to the client, or I would work directly with the client who themselves has AI generation capability and that, right?
That might be, yeah. There are 20 more use cases, but those are some of the use cases that are there.
What do you
Like for the
imagine them?
last
Mhm.
for the last year and a half, what we try to do was try to research who are all these companies that are developing,
Okay.
uh, who is backing those companies, so how much
Okay.
money flows through those companies,
Uh-huh.
and what kind of parts of the VO are they going to disrupt,
Uh-huh.
and what kind of new solutions are they going to bring.
Okay.
And so basically any client in VO, especially when they go to marketplaces like ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
they want three things. They need good quality voiceover, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not to say good performance
Right.
as in acting, but good quality.
Mm-hmm.
The audio quality needs to be pristine, etc., and it needs to be manipulatable.
Right.
The other part is it needs easy to work with, and
Mm-hmm.
the third part is fast turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and fast turnaround is where AI can do some damage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it could be instant, not in the scenario that we just spoke, but let's say there's a script I can immediately download, then whatever should take hours or days, I can do it in minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where AI in edge cases might uh, might add to your business.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the other use cases other than the ones I just described?
Um, so the character we already discussed.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is the as a as a person buying voiceover, especially these bigger corporations. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
Coca-Cola posts a job on Voice123.
Mm-hmm.
They post it in 20 different languages because they're going to go local, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the last couple of years, the industry per se has already changed from going general to local, more local, subculture of the subculture of the
Right.
subculture. So there's so many different niches that require more and more diverse voiceover and more work. So
Right.
lots of the companies struggle finding 100 talents for one type of job they have. So
Yeah.
I can see where, let's say I put on the sleeve of a Brooklyn accent, right? On top of my voice, I could potentially do a Brooklyn accent. Not it's not there yet, but I assume that's what part of the AI is going to do. It's going to increase your range. Or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen The Irishman with Robert De Niro, where he gets old, young, and old
No.
again,
No.
but that with CGI on
Right.
basically their physical appearance. I think the CGI version of the voice, meaning
Mm-hmm.
make me sound like a child, like a real child, or
Mm-hmm.
an older person. Those kind of use cases,
Mm-hmm.
I think, are also very interesting, and I think that's where most of the desire from the people buying voiceover is,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not where technology is able to do right now.
Okay, so they're interested in being able to manipulate the voices, have one source for it, and then manipulate it into whatever they need.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not even one source, but at least not 100 sources,
Right. Okay.
right? Because
Yeah.
that's where a lot of the VO work is right now. You're running a campaign that only runs for a week, and you need to do it with 100 different languages,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not, because content is no longer long lived, meaning it's not months that a campaign airs, but it's a couple of days,
Right.
then those projects become more and more expensive for the people buying them, creating them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the downside is, of course, what you mentioned in the beginning, it might be a race to the bottom in price. And yes, there might be a decline in overall pricing for VO work, but the volume of work increases, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
instead of doing one campaign in 3 months, they might do 10 campaigns in 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, sorry, it's a lot
No,
to,
I know.
to
I feel
digest.
that
Yeah.
I always get the feedback from people: A, you talk too fast, and B, you go on these tangents in different
No,
routes.
no,
So
it's
I
not
can
that.
only imagine.
It's
Yeah,
not that at all. It's actually just literally the information about AI. It's so
yeah,
new. I haven't used it. I'm just trying to understand for our listeners and myself. how it works. So, um,
I think that
what will,
what
yeah.
I'm trying to get across here mostly
Hmm.
is, instead of fearing it and keeping it outside because of the some of the horror stories that we've heard in the last couple of
Right.
years and
Yeah.
all that part, I th- this is not the kind of development that you should put your head in the sand. It's the kind
Hmm.
of development that you need to learn about, which is why we're we creating these kind of reports. Not necessarily, uh, not we don't have, our biggest gain is for more of the voice actors to be aware of it, so they don't get either just a discouraged by it, and b, like they're not going to run away from it, because
Hmm.
AI is coming, it's already here, right?
Right.
It's already here, so it's going to be a part of the VO industry. So
Right.
right now we can still shape what it's going to look like. If we wait 3 more years,
Hmm.
then we might be at the mercy of other companies who try to be at the forefront, and
Hmm.
then and we have to sort of follow. And
Right.
I mean, I know I'm biased because I work at Voice123, but I think, considering our openness as a platform, and
Hmm.
our ability, our mission and vision has always been, okay, let's put the voice actor client relationship at the center, and let's
Hmm.
not be a middleman. I think that's a good place for AI to also exist and to make sure that the voice actor is in control. But it requires you to know even more about it, and to at least not be afraid of it, and see it
Okay.
as as an opportunity.
Right. So, so I guess to answer some of the questions I already have, uh, one of them is, will projects be able to specify AI or regular VO, or will voice actors be competing directly with AI voices for some projects? I guess the answer to that is what we talked about, is that you can have an AI profile and a other profile, and the client can choose which one they want, right?
Yeah, so they can select, and then they can. What ideally would happen is that Ian submits, uh, either an AI audition and your own, or just your own, or but you can choose yourself, and the client can choose themselves.
Hmm.
What I think actually is going to happen, and
Hmm.
this is not a very popular opinion, and
Hmm.
it's majority of the people disagrees with me on this.
Hmm.
But right now the industry works in a pretty set way, right? It's
Hmm.
as a client, you need a gig, you need a voice actor, and you're gonna post a project, and you're gonna request 20 auditions. Then we're gonna
Hmm.
review those auditions, and most likely there's a middle, like an agency involved somewhere in that process, going to recommend the right
Hmm.
person, and that person's going to do the job.
Hmm.
That's a relatively long process and requires a lot of unpaid work from the actor,
Hmm.
because you have to audition a lot. Now, the
Right.
good side of auditioning a lot is that you're crafting, right?
Hmm.
You're building your skill set. The downside of it, I can only imagine, is that sometimes it feels like you're auditioning into an empty void, and you have to do so
Hmm.
much to get that job done. What I
Definitely.
think the next generation of people who work in companies, the millennials, maybe the Gen Zs, who are now the marketers, what they prefer is uh, to to find voice actors in the same way that they use Google.
Hmm.
They want to type, "I need this kind of voice,"
Hmm.
and Google, or what we try to be like the Google of VO, Voice on the Three, gives you a list of suggestions,
Hmm.
and then AI can help become like a mini audition,
Hmm.
because in 7 seconds or in 10 seconds, AI can fool you, right?
Hmm.
It can almost sound real.
Hmm.
But what it mostly does is that I can at least get a sense of what Ian sounds like for the type of project that I have in mind.
Hmm.
Let me book Ian.
Hmm.
So it might change the way auditions work,
Hmm.
in the sense that we're not going to go for mass auditions. I'm going to just test it out in real time with some of the people, and then I'm going to book Ian directly,
Okay.
uh, which is something I'm betting on, but
Hmm.
I'm very much alone in this.
Interesting. What do other people think?
They think, oh, audition will never go away as part of the industry, and you cannot put the performance in the audition via AI. And people are right about that. You cannot.
Hmm.
Uh, but based on the data we collected in Voice123, I learned more and more and more that in the audition process,
Hmm.
what most clients look like, and most clients are not people with good ears.
Right.
What they not look like. What they look for is a
Yeah.
person that has very good quality of audio,
Hmm.
because they're comparing it to the person in the office that's doing it right now,
Right.
and just the setting is already so much better, and they trust that everybody on platforms like Voice on 3 is already good at acting.
Hmm.
So as long as there is a minimum quality, then auditions in terms of acting performance is less important in the audition. It's more important at the moment that content is being created, meaning the actual session. So I am of opinion that in the audition part, the performance will become maybe less and less important over time. But again, very much alone. I accept that that it's a very dodgy and weak argument so far, but I can just see the use case for it. So I can see it might happen in the future.
No, I can definitely see the use case for that too. People want to be able to shop for whatever it is, whether it's, on Amazon or Google or whatever. It
Yeah.
makes sense that people will want to shop for voices in that same way.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that.
One more.
But okay, so sorry, I'm just thinking about my next question because there's again, it's so new and to all of
Yeah.
us. Um, let's see. Um,
Uh,
how will
oh yeah. Go
how
ahead.
will payments and earnings work with AI jobs? Just the same way that they work with regular VO?
Well, ideally, we come up with a system where you can generate like a passive income kind of way, right? So
Right.
just with, and again, it's an idea I've been floating for the last couple of years that again is not very popular. But one of the hardest things to figure out in VO is rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially rates when it comes to usage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then not just and then usage has so many different questions. If you can do podcast series just about rates, and then every guest will have a different logic of how they calculate rates, even
Mm-hmm.
within the existing frameworks that are being provided by GVAA, etc. The Bringing that back to how AI might work. Let's say you can do this as a client. So I'm gonna book Ian for 5 minute piece of work,
Mm-hmm.
and it's gonna have an audience size of about 50,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, audience size is a very web first approach to usage, right? Because that's
Whip first. What's that?
a web, like a digital approach. So if you buy commercial on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
or if you buy ads in Google,
Mm-hmm.
what you do is I want to show it to 10,000 people, or I want to show it to 50,000 people. I want to get 10,000 views, or I'm going to get 1 million views. And based on that, the price of that advertising is set.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's how most marketing budgets work,
Right.
based on what they're going to cost. And that's mostly based on the audience size.
Right.
Yet the VO industry is very much still thinking about local, regional, national, global.
Mm-hmm.
And those terms work if the world is the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, they start to to not work once you go into the digital realm,
Right.
because a YouTube ad of 6 seconds and that shows to 10,000 people, like or maybe 1 million, it really depends, right? But
Right.
most advertisers know at the moment they do a campaign what their audience size is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been trying to get people who are on Voice123 to also start thinking in audience size rather than local, regional, national.
Mm-hmm.
Wildly unpopular again, but let's say that works. Then I'm gonna go to your profile. I'm gonna say it's 5 minutes and it's for 50,000 people and it's gonna run 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can already build a very straightforward rate card on that, saying, okay,
Right.
I'm gonna charge per 1,000 people X amount of dollars, and then they will download that after approval, and they pay you with every time a viewer gets to see it,
Mm-hmm.
which is the most complex way to do it,
Mm-hmm.
or upfront.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that AI brings this industry more towards revenue sharing,
Mm-hmm.
because I think as a voice actor, that's also where the potential
Mm-hmm.
is not just upfront payments, but also participating in the success of the campaign that you might be in. So I think I went too far, but what I
Not
basically
at all.
trying to
Not at
say
all.
is it's a with a simplified version of usage,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's going to be either revenue share or upfront payment,
Okay.
depending on the rates that you set. And
Okay.
most likely, you're going to have to split that money with the company that builds the AI.
Right. Okay. So in the short term, again, we're going to record the AI for our client through a third party. In the long
Yeah.
term, possibly Voice123 might allow inputting of a script to output a VO, right?
Yeah, but also in that short term, that's already possible, because that's just a functionality that we have to build. It's more that I want to get across that we're not building our own AI technology simply because we can't, and that's a full-time business.
You're going to license with someone else to do that.
Yeah, or we just make sure that if you are an AI company and you want to work with people on Voice123, you need to be able to build your services in such a way that they can connect with whatever we build here.
Okay, so people
So it's like a project form kind of thing that we built, and then all these companies need to be able to connect to it.
So I guess in the long term, we would pay a fee for converting the voice to the script to RVO, right?
With to that company, not to us.
Right, in the long term with that company. So you would have those companies integrated to some degree, ideally, with the Voice123 process so that I could go in, okay, customer sends me a script. I'm going to choose which company I want to convert that script to my AI VO, do that, and then give that as a deliverable to the customer.
Yeah, but
Okay.
and maybe by that stage you already have that agreement with that company, so that deliverable can be instantaneous.
Right. Okay.
So then what we would have to figure out is like what kind of information would you like to know before you can, well, like what kind of projects can you set on auto approve, for example, right? Because that's going to be the interesting part, because that's passive income. Right. Then you wake up and say, okay, I got this, but we need to make sure that there's not use cases where Coca-Cola then does that, right? And then you're missing out on a potential big payout because the usage was not well defined. But if we can build the right case study, then I believe this can be a form of passive income, specifically for shorter promos, for right now for a lot of placeholders in games or even game characters. Over time, very regional or localized commercials. So there's these different kind of use cases that might need an AI version or a placeholder for an audiobook. There's all these different kinds of types, but we have to make sure that with the limited information that the person buying it and has, we can generate a quote that you as a voice actor feel comfortable with.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So I can definitely tell that you guys have talked at length with voice actors about this and really thinking about how it impacts the voice actors, which is really good. One of my questions was about that, but you've already answered it several times over. So, but what I do want to say is we voice actors generally think of Voice123 as the more ethical pro voice actor pay to play site, especially as compared to say Voices, right? Which is the
Historically,
opposite of
yes.
that.
Yeah.
So, and it sounds like you guys are using your leverage to be a force for good in this, in fairness and thinking of the voice actor and not just the client and not just the profit.
Yeah, but I think but then the question arises: so what's in it for Voice123?
Right. What is in it for Voice123?
Yeah.
You get a fee, I imagine.
No, so not for this. So what I think this was initially triggered by fear of missing out, so FOMO on my regard. But then I also realized the potential here is that if we are the platform that consistently offers VO in an ethical way that voice actors benefit from it, that's going to attract more and more clients. Whether they're going to buy AI or they're going to work with voice actors directly, it's going to be good for our ability to attract more voice clients. So for me, in the long term, this is like a user acquisition tool. I want to increase the network of Voice123 because the only reason Voice123 still exists, whether we are ethical or not ethical, is because we give work to voice actors and therefore voice actors come back to Voice123. So I'm constantly looking for new ways to bring more work to Voice123 because that's the only way that Voice123 can grow. So that's in it for me. So if I can capture this whole new type of VO and make sure that it happens on Voice123, then that's good for the Voice123 ecosystem. So in short, that's like the strategic idea that I had with us, and then we don't need to take a cut out of that revenue that is there because that makes no sense.
Well, I actually sort of feel the opposite. It makes no sense not to as a company. So convinced me that why.
Well, so if let's say
you want to
if
use
you
it
want
as
to
a
have an
promotional
AI
tool.
voice, if you want to have an AI voice, right?
Yeah.
And Voice123 is the place to go, then most
Right.
likely you're going to create a profile on Voice123, and most likely
Right.
you're going to buy a membership over time.
Right.
So revenue, when I pitch this to my shareholders, revenue will come to Voice123 via other routes, right?
So through the
Yeah,
membership fees.
through the membership fees. Like we were born as a company activistic and very clear in not wanting to be a middleman,
Okay.
but a facilitator, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we then suddenly change our model and let's do a 30-30-30 split,
Mm-hmm.
it's reducing so much from the voice actor that it becomes not that interesting anymore.
Right.
So I can like I think the best way for us to grow the network of Voice123 is not to be a middleman here and not to be another person holding their hand up to make sure that we're part of the transaction. But if we can offer it, then most likely more voice actors, more clients come to Voice123.
So does Voice123 not take any percentage of the client cost for a current VO?
No, so up until a year ago, there
Mm-hmm.
was no ability to pay on Voice123. There was only
Mm-hmm.
ability to pay to post a project and then book you.
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea how that happens or when that happens, because
Okay.
most likely that happens via your email inbox. So by that
Right.
time we're gone. We just make sure you match.
Mm-hmm.
A year ago, we added a booking functionality with a way to then pay.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost of that is a 9% fee that the client pays on top of their project. So let's say 100, then
Mm-hmm.
instead of 100, they pay 109.
Okay.
But that's to cover the cost, and our margin is about 3%. So that's where the profit is. It's not going to
Okay.
be that significant.
All right. So, okay, I didn't realize that was how your model worked. Okay. So your model is primarily to make money from the membership fees, really.
Yeah. So in the end, the voice actors are our main clients, right?
Right.
But the voice actors only care about Voice123 if we bring them voice clients.
Right.
So for our voice actors to be happy, we need to find them more people that give them work. So that's
Right.
where most of our focus is.
Okay. Very good.
I think that's why. So you see a lot of these new voice tech companies come up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they built this whole new platform for voice actors by voice actors, and they focus a lot on the voice actor experience, or they focus a lot on the person buying the voiceover experience.
Mm-hmm.
What I think what a lot of these new companies fail to grasp is that you're trying to build a network, and both sides are equally important. If you have voice actors build a voice actor platform, it doesn't work. If you have voice clients building a voice client platform, it doesn't work. You need to have like a sort of an independent third party
Mm-hmm.
mechanism, which I think Voice123 does quite successfully,
Mm-hmm.
for us to keep playing a role in this industry.
Got it.
We've been here for 20 years, so
Mm-hmm.
it's been quite a while.
Very good. Great. Let me just ask, do you have any projections from your research on how AI voices will affect VA's earnings and bookings?
So let's say most of your work right now comes from IVRs
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a lot of explainer videos
Mm-hmm.
for corporate courses,
Mm-hmm.
and I think those prices will go down.
Mm-hmm.
And but I have no other projections in terms of price, because the prices have been relatively flat for the last couple of years
Mm-hmm.
anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think this is going to instigate a race to the bottom, because this is like a new additional category of VO that
Mm-hmm.
has going to have their own rules, in the same
Mm-hmm.
way that IVR has their own rules and commercials have their own rules. So it's not going to heavily impact all these other segments. I predict, at least.
Okay. Thanks. And I have a couple of non-AI questions, if I may.
Please, yeah.
Just because I'm interviewing you, people are like, "Can you ask him this?" And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Sure,
of
okay."
course. Yeah.
So, some people have noticed and mentioned to me that Voice123 is adding links in the voice actor profiles. So, for example, the word voices or voice is actually linked to, I think, the Voice123 homepage
Yeah.
automatically, which is, as a voice actor, kind of annoying, because then it's taking people away from our profile into the potential of hundreds of thousands of other people's profiles. So a lot of people were really annoyed by that.
Got it. I have
Yeah.
to say, to be honest, I don't know the full extent of how long that functionality has been there or why it's there. I can assume it's because I think it's an SEO strategy on our end.
Yeah.
But
But it's a bad PR strategy with
yeah, I
the
can
voice
imagine,
actors.
because if I land on Ian and then I get taken away from your, I keep calling you Ian because in this example I'm
No,
going
that's
to your
fine.
profile,
It's my name.
but yeah, and then I get taken away. I can understand that. All
Yeah,
right,
so we would request that you guys don't
get
put
rid of
any
that.
SEO
Yeah.
in our profile because that just feels
Well,
offensive. Yeah.
well, I think if it gets taken away, it just gets it gets redirected to the homepage. But yeah, let me look into it. I have to. I don't know the full extent to what that is
Yeah.
for, to be honest.
Yeah, it was just something someone mentioned
Yeah.
to me, and people were like, "Yeah, that's terrible," and it's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind
Fair
of
enough. Yeah.
crappy." All right, and then here's the ever present question, I'm sure,
There it comes. Yeah.
is can you speak to the ranking system? It's confusing for many people, and there are a lot of just rumors about how it works, what the strategy is. There are people who are giving courses on how to work with the Voice123 strategy and everything.
Yeah.
For example, is it true that if you take a week off vacation or an illness that your rank drops?
No.
Okay. Is the top 20%, is that the top 20% of your level or every level?
Every level.
So if I'm in the top 20%, I'm in the top 20% of the people who pay 1200 or 18 or 600
Yeah.
altogether.
That
Okay.
for all together. Yeah.
Altogether.
But let me just bring a step back on why we have that in the first place and
Yeah.
how it works. Like I keep having, I haven't been able to find the right way to explain it
Yeah.
so precisely that it's easy to
Yeah.
understand. Which means that according to many people, I don't understand it myself potentially, but I think I do. The So we have a problem on Voice123, in that is that we are not what you call a transactional platform. So
Hmm.
we don't know if a client works with you,
Hmm.
right? All we know is whether or not the addition was useful or not to them,
Hmm.
right? So a lot of the feedback from our voice actors is always, well, my ranking score is quite low, but I book a lot on Voice123, or my rank score is quite high, but I don't book, or my ranking score is super high, but I book is low, but I book everywhere else. Um, what this ranking score does is it's a way for clients to give consistent feedback to us whether the addition that you provided was very relevant or not.
And it's only it's like 5 auditions per job, right? That they can rank, isn't it?
No, they can rank unlimited. They can,
Okay.
if they want, they can like every single proposal on that page.
Okay. All right, so that's good to know. And then I actually asked a client that I got on Voice123 to put a
Like,
review for me, right?
okay, yeah.
Or like they couldn't figure out how to do it.
No, review is something relatively new that we have,
Okay.
and so we haven't made it part of the system yet because there's not enough reviews for it to be
Okay.
relevant. Plus, um, yeah, it's mostly that we don't have enough reviews for it to be relevant, I guess.
Which
So
is sort of a, chicken and egg sort of thing, right?
yeah, so we
Obviously.
start collecting them, and then maybe
Mm,
over time it becomes important, but I don't foresee it happening that much, especially
okay.
not for the audition part. For the
Mm,
audition part, essentially what we're promising the person who posts a project is that we're
mm,
going to invite the people that are that you're most likely to book for your
mm,
project, and that are
mhm.
very relevant for the project that you have.
But
Not
they can't come back later and then give us like 5
review.
stars, right?
No, no.
That might be a good thing.
Yeah, we might have the. Well, we used to have the star system, most
Mhm.
hated functionality in Voice123 before
Oh, really?
we got rid of it. Yeah.
Okay. It's good to know.
So the thing is that there's not going to be a flawless way
Right.
to turn something that's very subjective,
Right.
right? Whether you like to work with a person or not, or whether it matches your specific project, what you have in your head or not, and find like a super uh, flawless way to do that and turn it into math. There's no way to do it. This
Mhm.
is the closest we can get with the kind of information that we're collecting right now,
Mhm.
because we also don't want to collect more and more information from everything that happens, because
Mhm.
then we become part of the transaction, become part of more and more and more. But with
Mhm.
the information that we have, we know that we have to look at the ranking score and the membership, and that's how we're going to send out these invitations
Mhm.
to our users.
Okay. And one last thing is, That's all right. I wanted to talk about, you said that you guys will moderate issues between clients and voice
Yeah.
actors. What is the extent of what you do for that?
So I think we have like one case every 2 years when there is, let's say, a client that uses an audition. Actually, it
Hmm.
happened once since I've been in Voice123. It happened once where a
Okay.
client uses an audition straight away and use it for the end product, right?
Okay.
We're gonna help in this case first track them down and make
Hmm.
sure we get into contact, make sure that the voice actor gets paid if it's necessary, and if not, help resolve it if needed legally, but it's never come to that.
Okay.
So we're just trying to make sure that the voice actor gets paid for the work that they do.
So you guys will, if necessary, step in, talk to the client, and
No,
try
no,
to
that we definitely
resolve it.
do.
Okay.
Yeah, so that we definitely do. And we normally, if there is misuse, then we remove them from the platform as well.
Okay.
But we try to make sure that it's resolved first.
Okay.
Most of the issues in VO happen because of miscommunication.
Right. Ironically enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else that we should know about AI and TTS that we haven't covered?
Uh, read read more about it.
Hmm.
See what kind of opportunity it can have for your own career, and make sure that whenever you do go into contract or trying to work with any AI or TTS company, make sure that the contracting is in a way that you feel comfortable.
Hmm.
If not, don't do it. They need you way more than you need them. These
Hmm.
companies are they're burning money
Hmm.
to just work with voice actors. It's been very hard for AI companies to work with voice actors because they know how to write AI.
Hmm.
But being creative is a whole different ball game. So as the voice actor, you're always the expert in the room, whether
Hmm.
that's in a session with any director or whether that's in a session with a TTS company.
Hmm.
So know your role there, and don't get overpowered by these companies. They need you more than you need them.
Nice. Okay. And oh, yes. Do you guys have a section on the site about AI, like a learning section for voice actors to learn about it, like we have this conversation, a
Yeah,
bunch of definitions, and maybe ideally links to the
companies.
AI companies that you guys recommended and have vetted.
Yeah. So we start this whole new place called The Booth. It's
Okay.
by Voice123, but it's
Mhm.
precisely aimed at this kind of information, not just about AI, but any other industry topics.
Okay.
So this kind of information that I shared, that most clients look for: fast turnaround time, ease of work with, and quality of audio.
Hmm.
Those are like insights that we have and we feel we need to share more. That's what the booth is for. And there's also the report on AI and more insights on that to follow, like the definitions. I haven't even thought about that, but that's a good idea. Make sure that these definitions are there. But the report and these companies, they're already on the booth.
Okay. So we can find companies that you guys have already vetted.
Not vetted. That's a good clarification. You're right.
Oh,
No, we haven't created a vetted list yet.
okay. But you will.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
All right. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rolf. I appreciate
No,
it.
thanks. Thanks,
Yeah.
Ian. Thanks for the
Yeah.
questions.
All right. You've been listening to Voiceover. How did you do it? At www.voiceoverpodcast.com with me, Ian Kleinfeld. You can watch the video to all our podcasts at voiceoverpodcast.com/YouTube. The background track is 1959 by my alter ego Max Rocket, and you can find that and other songs at www.maxrocketmusic.com. Remember to like, subscribe, write a review, and all that good stuff on whatever podcast streaming service you're listening to, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.